Welcome to the 6 o'clock news. If you're watching this at 6 o'clock a.m. or p.m., we're here to give you what's been happening in the world of tabletop, board game, and card games for the week of July 6th, 2020.
Stephen Buonocore has announced that he will be retiring from his position as president of Stronghold Games. He founded the company back in 2009 and has held that position pretty much since then consistently. He said that his retirement is due to his desire to spend more time with family, focus on other interests in his life, but he still intends on attending conventions, also continuing to host his Board Game Insider podcast, and in general being somewhat of a presence in the industry as much as time allows. And taking over now as director of game development as Stronghold will be Sydney Engelstein, who is a game designer and daughter of Jeff Engelstein. She worked together with her dad on games such as Space Cadets, as well as Space Cadets Dice Duel. So this is a big shakeup in the board game industry. 2009 doesn't seem like that long ago, but for us, that's pretty much our entire time being aware of the board game industry. And Stephen Buonocore has always been a big presence at conventions. I can't say that we know him well, but we've met him. I believe we've interviewed him once or twice before. So this is a big change for the industry.
Yeah, I know, in fact, we have interviewed him, and it is good to hear that while he may be stepping down from Stronghold, he's not leaving the board game world, because I think Stronghold is going to have a hard enough time filling his shoes. Having the board game world fill something with his energy that he brings, both figuratively and literally, to the table, would be very hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, the guy was really out there all the time on different podcasts, doing interviews, promoting games, and clearly had a great passion for everything that he was doing. Whether or not you were always a fan of everything Stronghold was putting out, he was always, like you said, energetic and ready to get out there. I do think it's nice that we have Sydney Engelstein now taking over for game development, because there aren't too many women in these higher up positions at prominent companies like this. So I think that's a great choice, and I'm very interested to see what the next phase of Stronghold Games is going to look like.
I wonder if she'll also make cardboard cutouts of herself to just post around in random places.
It's tradition. She should do it.
Bicycle is no stranger to the tabletop world, printing many different versions for the popular 52 cards used for poker and other card games. However, they're working on making some new board games, and they've brought on someone new to be their ambassador for these board games for the general audience. You may recognize the name as Wil Wheaton, who ran the very popular Tabletop video series. He has been brought on with the official title of Bicycle Global Board Game Ambassador. His goal will be able to show off their board games, not just the basic 52 cards, to the general gaming audience and show what they have to offer. Right now, their newest games are Alpha, which is about running a pack of wolves, as well as Exchange, which is all about the stock market. This is a pretty big deal because Wil Wheaton ran Tabletop, which for a lot of people was the way they got introduced into the board gaming world.
Yeah, I have no doubt that that is what Bicycle is thinking of when they decided to bring him on, because I'm sure that it's probably difficult for them right now to convince people or make people realize that, oh, we have other stuff. We're not just playing cards anymore. And so I think Wil Wheaton is probably the best person you could possibly get in terms of an established name to do that, because like you said, with Tabletop, he made it his entire gimmick for board games to try and introduce board games to a wider market, and was extremely successful at it.
In addition, let's not forget that he's not just a pretty face. He's played a lot of board games, so he can actually bring that knowledge back. And if they do have a new game, he can be like, hey, what if you add this, or this doesn't work so well? So I think this will also maybe help elevate their own games in addition.
In convention news, PortalCon Online will be held July 11th and July 12th this coming weekend. If you're watching this when we put it out, Portal Games will be streaming both of those days from the US and Poland, showing off some of their new titles and playing games with the live streaming audience. Then we can look at Board Game Geek Con, which has now been officially canceled for the fall of this year. Instead, they're going to be holding their virtual gaming con online, their second one, after successfully partnering with Dice Tower to hold one just a little while ago. They also announced as part of this that they are now taking over Tabletop Events, which is an online solution to schedule tabletop gaming events, whether it be online or in person if and when that day comes again. So they have been happy with that software, and now Board Game Geek themselves are going to be in charge of it and how it operates, as opposed to simply using it as a third-party platform. And then finally, if you are watching this now, then the Gen Con online event schedule is available. You can go to gencon.com and read the full finalized schedule for that convention, which will be taking place at the end of this month. So we can't go to conventions in person, but there's still a lot of online things that we can look forward to.
I'm very excited to see that schedule because we are recording before it's released, so I can't really say what I'm excited to look at just yet.
Portal this weekend, that's going to be exciting. I know there's a lot of cool stuff in the works. Like I said, they're going to be giving games away and playing things, maybe having people call in. And virtual gaming cons, again, seem to be a really big success. So people are finding their footing with all these online events, and seems to be making some progress towards some kind of a positive new normal.
Dice Tower has announced the winners to its Dice Tower Awards for 2020. We'll have a link down below for a list of all the winners for each category. Some of them are pretty obvious, such as Wingspan winning overall best game of the year. Some interesting ones, including Detective City of Angels winning most innovative.
I think this is kind of the opposite of the Golden Geek Awards, in that whereas we talked about that one with Wingspan just sweeping everything, this one has a really nice spread. I don't think anything won more than like 2 awards between a single game. So I like that they spread that love around. I don't know how much that was intentional or just happenstance, but I do think it's obvious there's a difference between just the mass audience online voting for awards versus a specific selection of people and their preferences. But it's nice to see different games getting the spotlight.
There is a balance of both, but the one thing I would always want to make sure people take away from this is the best thing to do is not just look at the winner, look at the entire list. Because odds are, even if it's as you said, the mass voting, or this one's just a small group of people voting the same for each one, usually if something's made that list, it's good.
Yeah, don't just spend your money on the winners. Also spend all of your money, hundreds more dollars, on all the runners-ups too. That's what we're trying to say. Stonemaier Games has announced their next big release, titled Pendulum. This is scheduled for pre-orders in August, and then for shipping hopefully later in that same month if you're able to get in on time. This comes from designer Travis Jones, and it is his first published game, but they said that it was the highest rated game in the history of Stonemaier's game design days, where they test out new prototypes, which is saying a lot considering what kinds of games Stonemaier has seen. And the description of it is interesting. I think it's one of those games that you might have to see or play in person to fully wrap your head around it, but I'll try to describe it. It's a worker placement game that involves a set of sand timers, 3 of different lengths, and when you place your workers on a certain space, then you will have to flip a timer, and you cannot move your workers again until that timer has run out. So depending on what the action is and how you want to use it, you may want to go for a shorter or longer timer. So you're kind of managing how long you want to take or can afford to take to think some of your actions through, or to get enough time to work your way up to carrying them out most efficiently and optimally. It takes place in a fictional kingdom called Dunia, and you're all trying to become the new ruler of this world. So again, it sounds kind of crazy. I've read the designer diary entries about how it works, and I still don't quite get it, but it's worker placement, it's simultaneous action, so everyone's like putting things out and flipping timers at the same time, but you're all affected by the sand timers. It sounds kind of crazy.
I mean, I think it sounds like a really clever idea. We're having this, I feel it's very underneath. I don't know if we've hit like roll and write levels yet, but I'm seeing sand timers appear a bit more in board games recently. And I sort of like that because it's a kind of pressure that helps take away that analysis paralysis. No matter what, something's going to happen in a minute, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that can be a plus, definitely. And I think that you generally associate sand timers often with lighter games, but I think this is interesting that it definitely sounds like a fairly deep strategy game that employs them in a very novel way that we definitely haven't seen before. And the fact that, again, highest rated from their design day ever, I mean, that intrigues me, certainly. So
I'm trying not to get my hopes up because I think plenty of times I feel a game that, I mean, the games aren't usually bad, but like everyone said, like, this was amazing. And then I'm like, it was fine. I don't want to let the game be ruined because of that. So I'm trying to keep my expectations low. Granted, having the Stonemaier name, it's already hard enough because, like you said, that means very good quality usually.
fair enough. Well, it won't be too long before we get the chance to find out and play it for ourselves.
Steve Jackson Games have announced a new Munchkin, this one titled Munchkin and Mazes. Munchkin was a take that, stab your friends in the back game that originally was based on Dungeons and Dragons. However, that was a while ago and it parodied older editions. A lot has happened in the world of Tabletop since then, including an explosion with 5e Dungeons and Dragons. This is a new version with maybe some new changes to the names of cards and revisiting some of the tropes and stuff and what now certain things mean in Dungeons and Dragons. It is very interesting to see them return to their roots, so to speak. And there's a whole like developer's description of what they visited, how they changed some things around, and maybe even look at some cards and like, yeah, we'll bring it back, but maybe a different version of it. And, for a lot of people, Munchkin is that gateway game. I'm very curious to see what they did to sort of maybe refer back to some of the more notorious cards in the original set.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I fully understand their hesitation around not calling this a new edition. Like they want it to, I guess, coexist with the original Munchkin. But there have been tweaks to Munchkin over the years. And this doesn't seem that different. It seems just like they updated the jokes and maybe a few of the cards. So I feel like personally a little confused as to like, so is this for hardcore Munchkin collectors who just want to play everything? Or is this meant to be like new players should come into this one and now it's a little more relevant and modern? I don't know where exactly it sits, but it's interesting the way they're approaching it.
I'm taking it as sort of like you can jump into any of the core Munchkin sets, just like if it's Super Munchkin or Munchkin Cthulhu. It's just, sure, it's still a D&D theme, but it's going to probably make more sense to newer players, I guess, if like, oh, look, they make a joke about streaming now for leveling up or something. And now they're going to have maybe some of the new races or other weird 5e stuff. But I don't think it's meant to replace it. It's just like, there's the 5e Munchkin book, and then there's original Munchkin.
Fantasy Flight Games is bringing back the Lord of the Rings board game from designer Reiner Knizia with the Lord of the Rings Anniversary Edition. This is essentially the same game as the original, same rules, same artwork. You will be guiding the Fellowship, trying to take the ring to Mount Doom. It is a cooperative game in which you're trying to play the correct symbols from cards to match different spaces that you're moving to without gaining too much corruption from the ring itself. This one will have a few updated components in the form of minis now instead of standees, as well as even minis for the ring itself. So now you have a 3D model of that ring which you can fit around the minis of the characters that you are playing as. But this doesn't come with any of the expansions that were previously released. Again, no artwork, no extra boards, really no nothing. It's just the same original game, but with now some minis instead of those original components. So to me, I looked at this and I thought, oh, that's cool at first, but it really isn't bringing too much to the table. I guess maybe it was harder to find the original version. I'm not actually sure because I haven't tried to look for it lately. I don't know what the print runs were like.
To be fair, it's already on your shelf.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have a copy of it, but I mean, if you already have the game, I see no reason whatsoever to upgrade to this one. And if you can find the original one cheaper, it seems like, again, it's the same thing, unless you really want those minis instead of the standees. But I do think this is a cool game. I think it's an early example of managing to feel very thematic, but in a way that isn't the way I feel like so many modern games do it, where it's, oh, well, now there's an app and you read a story card, like more thematic in its mechanics and how they make you feel.
The things we usually like. We love reading from a phone.
Right. So I don't know. It's there for you. It's coming out later in the year. If you haven't picked it up, it's not. I'm sure it's not a bad buy.
Czech Games Edition has announced a new game to add to their collection, The Lost Ruins of Arnak. In this game, you are explorers, well, exploring some lost ruins on an island. This is a worker placement and a deck building game where you will be having to use both the deck building mechanic to generate resources and explore the island, while also placing workers with spaces opening up as you continue to explore the island. Now, not all spaces will require workers. They may also just require resources or maybe a combination of both. So you're going to have to make sure you manage your cards, workers, and resources correctly. I am very excited to see this game. We don't know much else besides that, but I love deck building. I thought their last game, Sanctum, was pretty cool, so I'm curious how this game is going to combine these elements together.
I think it's a really interesting idea to have a deck building game, but some of the cards that you play sounds like will allow you to play workers. I think that's a really cool combo, and those are two genres that I don't think I would begrudge anyone for calling them stale, but I've never heard of anyone putting them together in that way. Just like we saw with Pendulum putting a new spin on worker placement. I think it's always a lot of fun to see how companies can take these old mechanics and give new life to them.
I will say this with deck building. I think we're at the point when making just a deck builder isn't enough. I think the mechanic is great. It just needs to be mixed with something. And ideas like this are what that mechanic needs.
There are some new releases to tell you about from the past few weeks, starting off with Cosmic Encounter Duel, the two-player version of Cosmic Encounter. You and your opponent will still be taking on the roles of strange alien races with unique powers, this time just fighting against each other to try to achieve 5 colonies on different planets first. Detective Dig Deeper is available now. This is the first in the signature series for the detective narrative crime-solving game from Portal Games. This one is from designer Rob Davio. It's a single scenario that sees you trying to solve the death of a politician in the 70s. Dune has a new expansion called Dune Ixians and Tleilaxu. These are 2 new factions that you can play as, and it adds some new mechanics into the mix as well. 2 new expansions for Everdell are now available at retail, Spirecrest and Belfair. With these 2, you can now explore new lands, venture out of your village, as well as add a 5th and 6th player, and a number of other modules and new mechanics depending on which of the 2 you decide to add to your collection. Godspeed from Pandasaurus is an alternate history take on the sci-fi genre. You will be playing as scientists from different nations attempting to colonize a distant planet that it turns out we were able to do even before we landed on the moon. There's some real intrigue here. It involves an auction mechanic as well as worker placement and some negotiation. Magic has its 2021 core set released for the year. Of course, because it's called 2021, so I don't know what other year it would be for. This one includes a heavy emphasis on cats versus dogs. It adds milling now as an official mechanic for you to take cards off the top of your deck to achieve different goals. And of course, there are some new cards and returning favorites, including the Planeswalker Teferi. So take a look at this one if you're a Magic fan. For My Little Scythe, there's the new expansion, Pie in the Sky. This is the kids' version of Scythe, and now there is an airship added to the game, and certain actions will move that airship around and give you new ways to gather resources.
Roleplayer Fiends and Familiars is the newest expansion for the Roleplayer series. This expansion, of course, adds plenty of new cards to the already existing stacks, but also adds some new things. First off, Fiends are some very annoying creatures that will make things a little bit harder for you to master and level up, while Familiars will help you out when you contribute dice to them. Moving on to the Search for Planet X, this new game will have you searching for the Planet X against other astronomers, being the first one to find it. You'll be using an app, and you'll be gathering clues secretly, such as where asteroids are, clouds, or empty space. Hopefully you'll be able to narrow down the sky and find out where Planet X actually resides. Sheriff of Nottingham is getting a new edition from a new publisher. This second edition, now from Come On Games, is the same core mechanic with some new art, as well as some of the expansions thrown in, including the 6th player and Black Market. Sonora from Pandasaurus Games is a desert-themed flick and write, where you'll be flicking chips onto a board with different sectors. Each sector has its own way of scoring, so you're going to have to be careful of not only where you flick, but how your opponents may react and maybe bump you out of the way. Of course, if you have more of a green thumb, then Succulent is probably the game for you. In this game, you're all competing to prove you are the best gardener by using water crystals and gaining plants to complete certain categories, earn victory points, and prove you are the best gardener of them all. For the RPGers out there, we got Tales from the Loop starter set. This is a starter kit for the Tales of the Loop RPG, which is sort of a Stranger Things-like theme where you play as younger kids in a close to the real world, but strange oddities happening around there. Finally, we have Unmatched Jurassic Park. This will pit the Velociraptors versus the InGen employees. As the humans, you'll be laying traps and trying to slow down the clever girls from mauling your entire team.
So obviously, it's been a little while since we've covered releases. There's a lot to talk about here. We're not going to go over everything, but a lot of high-profile releases. It's getting close to the Gen Con-ish time, so it makes sense. We're seeing a lot of these coming out right now. A lot of hype coming out for these. I know you've been opening Magic packs over there.
That's right. I actually opened one on stream. Those games, though, a lot of them are pretty cool. The Sonora one sounds really interesting. I'm always a fan of the desert theme. I know the Unmatched one we are both very excited for.
Oh yeah, we definitely want to try out those Raptors, and I think they have more Jurassic Park sets coming too, at least one more. But I don't know if they've said what it's going to be exactly, but that's very, very cool. Fans of Unmatched. I mean, Cosmic Encounter Duel, of course. I'm interested to find out exactly how that's going to feel 1v1. And Godspeed, another Pandasaurus one, has got a lot of hype behind it. I mean, like almost all of these games are ones that are really worth taking a look at if they sounded interesting to you. And let us know in the comments section which ones did sound interesting to you, which ones are you maybe playing already, and of course you can let us know how you feel about any of these news stories. Pay your respects to Stephen Buonocore, thank him for all his service over the years, or welcome Wil Wheaton back into the board game world in an official capacity. Whatever you have to say, you can say it down below.
We need more Wills in the tabletop world.
I agree to some extent.
Well, until then, I'm Will.
I'm Jonathan.
And this has been Roll for Crit.
Hey, go ahead, like and subscribe, and support our Patreon for even more board game content.
Support us now to hear the audio expansion, where you can hear all the other nerdy things we've been up to.